Okay, so let's start by turning off our rows here, just so it'll speed up our previews. And we're going to use a landscape object for our clay. So go to your primitives and click landscape. And if we go over to the origin here, we're going to adjust the size so that it's 1000 in the X, because that's how wide our wall is, and just really short in the Y, just about 2. And then we'll do about 75 in the depth, the Z dimension. And we're going to slide this up, and it can overlap a little bit, but it's going to be half the distance. So like 35 here. There we go. That's in place. Let's move it down so that it's our bottom wall panel is in place. Good, good. And we'll slide it all the way over. Our magic number, mine is 475, not negative 475, positive 475, so that on each edge we'll have the warning track all the way to the edge of the wall. Now, what the landscape does is it gives it just a little bit of variation in the depth and the furrows of the clay, and if you can play around with the settings here for the rough furrows and the fine furrows, and we want to uncheck our borders at sea level. What that's doing is it's making our borders perfectly even down here and at the edges. So if we uncheck that, the variation now goes all the way to the edge, and you get a little bit more distortion here at the edges, and that will look better ultimately. So let's change the name of landscape to clay, and I have a clay material here, and I'll show you what I did for it. It's got a bump channel for creating some dirt clumps and whatnot, and it's got the noise behind it is the color that you get for the clay. And what I was having trouble doing is, and this is just one way you could do it, and there's other ways you can do it, but I did a tiles shader that created the stripe, or the line, the chalk line, and you just have to get it the right settings here in like the global scale to get it to line up properly with your foul pole. So if we apply this material right here to our clay, and you may have to adjust this if your models are a different size. If we go and we do like a quick render here to see where is our line here, it is probably in the middle here somewhere. There's our line, our chalk line. And what we want to do is, if you go to the material and you offset it in the X dimension, I found the magic number for me is 32.5. That way it will offset our stripe to be lined up with this pole, and then the next stripe that comes in the sequence will be lined up with this pole. And it's a little bit tedious, and that's okay though. It's just one way to do it. I'll show you a way that I'll do it for the grass, which is next, that is also a method you could do, and it's just a little trickier with the landscape primitive than just a flat plane object, which is what we're going to do next for the grass. So go for a flat plane object and make the width 1000, just like our wall in our landscape, and make the height about 200 and the width segments about 200. Let's actually go to where it is. There it is. Okay, and we can move this in the X to line up, same numbers, and let's move it in the Y as well so that it lines up. This is actually too tall now that I see it. We don't have to make it 200. Let's make it 100. We don't need that much grass in our composition. Alright, so let's get it lined up. Let's switch to the left view to get it in the right spot. And you see it's above our clay right now, which is not what we want. We want it kind of below our clay here. And we'll slide it so that it's right at the edge. And we'll go back to the editor or perspective view and do a quick render to see. Now we got this plane in front of our wall, or our clay. So let's call it grass. And if we check out the subdivision with the polygon tool, we're going to create we're going to add hair to this in order to create the grass. That's really the only thing I've ever used hair for, is to simulate the grass. And if we make this object editable, we're going to use the same technique that we used for our stripes on our wall panels. We're going to go to selection, and we're going to get the ring selection outline tool and find the stripe, where the stripe lines up with your foul pole, and select that group of polygons, and then go to the other pole and do the same thing with this stripe. Okay, hold the shift key. Wrong one. Okay, hold the shift key so both of them are highlighted, and go to hair, add hair. Alright, and it's added this really long, tall hair to our selections, and it's created this selection tag for us on our grass. So let's call this stripe grass, and delete the default material on there. I've provided the green grass and the white grass for the outfield stripe, so this is going to be the outfield stripe. So let's take that grass and put it on our stripe grass, and let's see what it does. It's really tall right now. We're going to have to adjust these settings because that grass is like 8 feet tall. That's not going to work. So go to your grass, and under guides for length put 3. Okay, and it may seem a little short, but baseball grass is supposed to be pretty short. And go to forces and make sure gravity is at 0, otherwise it's going to have some sort of dynamics to it. And the count is a little high. You can do about 1500, I think, and get away with it. We'll check that later once we get the camera set up. Alright, so we've got grass now right there, and it helps to apply this green material to our grass plane object, and that way it'll stand out a little bit more, and it'll fill in the gaps once we add the green grass to it, in order to kind of make it seem like you can't really see the gray, the default gray in between the blades of grass. So let's add the rest of the grass now. You can just highlight your polygon object here, the plane, and just do under selection, go to invert right here, and it inverts the last selection you had with the stripes to now selecting everything else. And you can go to, we'll add hair to this, so hit add hair, and now it's added the hair to everywhere else. So let's take that and just call it grass, and delete the material that defaults to it, okay, and apply the green grass material I have on here, and apply, and now it's still really tall, so we're going to make that short by length of 3, just like before, and make sure the gravity is set to 0, and for under guides, hairs, go to count and increase it to about 100,000. It's a lot of hair, and it's going to take a little bit to render, but you can't have really patchy grass. The gaps will look kind of goofy. So if we do a quick render from overhead here, it's going to say preparing hair, and the hair does take a while. When you add it with the seats and the rows, this render will take a little bit of time, but it's all elements that we need. So, and that's the best way to get grass in Cinema 4D, is with hair. So may take about 30 seconds for my computer to do it. I don't know about yours, but the best way to manage this is to use the traffic light system to hide and show just the elements you need. And you can see we've got this grass going on here, and it looks pretty good to me. I like the way this is looking, and it's a nice short grass that looks like a baseball field. So we've got that set up now, and next we're going to add our cameras and lights to our scene. So for a camera, we're just going to go with a regular camera here and change the coordinates in the rotation settings to be 0 all the way around. And what this camera is going to do is it's just going to simply pan from one pole to the other. The only part you're going to keyframe is the X position. So once we zero in on this, we got to actually switch the camera, sorry. the camera, so the rotations are set at 0, so you can see it's parallel with the wall. And basically we're going to go to our 0 frame here, and we're going to go to the far pole here, and we're going to set this up to be, you want the wall to take up most of the frame because that's where your title is going to be. So if you want just a little bit of the grass in there, or you want a lot more grass, it's up to you, but the wall should be, in the most of the frame towards the middle. And if we set a keyframe there for X in the X dimension, and then we go to about 30 frames in and scoot over, well, we want to keep it the same in the Y, so be careful, like I'm moving in the Y dimension. So if we set just a keyframe in the Y dimension, that will help because we can move in the X here, and we just get it lined up in the X however we want, and just set the keyframe for the X, and then, whoops, you gotta scoot. I didn't scoot my frames over. Sorry. Multitasking here. Alright, so if we just scoot the X position over and we get the X lined up and hit a keyframe, it will jump to the default Y that we have, because if you just set the one keyframe, that's all it's going to go off of. Now, what I did in my example is, when I first did this, is I added like a little camera wobble at the end of the move, to where the camera's like doing like a swish pan from left to right, and when it gets to the far right, it kind of wobbles into place, and it adds a little bit of realism to it. So I spread it out by like add like three frames. Every 3 frames, set a keyframe in the X dimension, and then in the first one we want to overshoot it a little bit, so go a little bit further than you want it to end up on, and set a keyframe there. And then for the second keyframe, bring it back a little bit further to the left than you want it to end up at, and then the last keyframe will be in the spot that you actually want it to end in. So if we just kind of scrub through this real quick, you see it overshoots it a little bit, and then it like settles into place. And I think it adds a little bit of a realistic camera move to it, instead of just like a straight pan from one keyframe to the other. So that's our camera move, and the good thing about this is it's set up to we can set this up to render just these frames. We don't have to render anything before or after this, because in After Effects we'll just do a time remap to extend the still frames of each wall. Since there's nothing moving, we can just do a still frame in each. So the entire render will be 36 frames in this case. It'll be just the point where the camera moves. Alright, so let's set up some lights, and I'm going to switch to the editor camera. Now, as far as lighting goes, a stadium lighting would have lights all around, so kind of like everything would be pretty evenly lit. I'm going to just do some regular point lights here, and if we zoom out here, I'm just going to set up maybe 3 lights high above, casting shadows down on our scene. So I'm going to get my one light here, and then I'm going to just grab my move tool, and I'm going to move it high above our scene, do like 1300 or so. That's what I'm doing here. And because that's where like a light source would be coming from, the stadium lights like way up here. And I'm going to duplicate that a couple times, and I'm going to put another light in the middle here between the poles, and then another one is going to be on the right side. And I'm going to drop the intensity down to about 50 on these, and turn the shadow on. I got good results using area shadows. It'll take a little bit longer for your renders, but it'll be a little bit more precise with your renders. Now, and then I move these lights a little bit forward, so they're casting shadows, or they're casting light on the front of the wall. Whoops, I'm moving them down. Sorry, not paying attention. Alright, move them forward in the Z dimension to give light to the front of the wall as well. And if I get back to our scene camera, and I don't have the rose turned on because it's going to take a little bit of time, so I'm just going to let that sit there for a little bit, and I'm going to do the render here to see what everything looks like. And from here on out, the best way to set this up is to render the pieces separately and bring them into After Effects. I did 3 different parts. I did the grass as one render, the wall, the clay, and the poles as another, and the seats as a separate render. So you have color correction control over each element, and I think that's a little bit smarter of a way to do it. Okay, couple things. I'm not liking the shadows underneath our wall here. We can't see the detail of our bottom panel. It just looks like a big gap right now, and some color correction might be able to take that out, but I'd rather there be a little bit of detail in there at this point. And our grass needs to move up like 1 unit so that this edge is not quite visible. So grab your grass and move the coordinate up 1. That should do it. And I want to add like a fill light in front of our scene here. So let's grab a new light and move it just in the front of our scene. Oh, did I move it down again? Yeah, I did. Okay, Z dimension, move it forward so it's in front, move it to the center, I guess, and then up just a little bit, and add some shadows, turn them on, and then intensity of about 50 as well. Let's see if that gives us a better result. It may take a little bit. It'll probably take, I didn't do the math, but if you have all your elements turned on in the scene, it might take as long as it would to just crank out 3 separate renders anyway. So I don't know if it'll actually save you any time or take more time. I didn't really time it with a stopwatch or anything like that, but it's better to have each element separate so that in case you want to go back and change something with the grass or the wall or the seats, you go back and you can just render out that part, and you don't have to waste your time rendering out the grass if you're changing something in the seats. Okay, I like that. It's a lot better. A lot better. One thing I'm noticing though is our clay has some gaps here as well. So we're going to just scoot that up 1 unit as well, and then I guess we'll have to scoot the grass up 1 unit as well too to keep that moving the same direction. But you want that kind of variation in the clay. It's a little bit higher up here than it is down here. You want that because that's how real clay would look. So I think it's only helping. I'm going to turn our rows back on before we wait for this render. Let's see how long it takes. Could take like 40 seconds or so on my computer, and it's going to vary based on what kind of system you have. And you want to just get the scene right, and it's only going to be a 36 frame render in this case, so that's pretty short, and you don't have to add any motion blur or crazy post effects like that will take even longer. And let's see what we got. 30 seconds, it's still going. Cool, that's better. That's better. I think what it is it's actually casting some shadows. I'm not really sure. I gotta get in there to see. I'm going to turn the shadows off on the fill light to see if that's what's causing it. And then I'm going to turn my rows off. But the seats look good to me. They've got the right kind of dirt on there, and the shadows look good on them. See what we got here. Preparing hair. You can see that the hair is taking the most time because there's so many that you need for the blades of grass. And Not really a great method to avoid that, but you could use some fill hairs or whatnot to. Okay. What is it? Just is a shadow, it appears. So I think you can do, if you're not liking the result for your clay, you can just do a different scale, right? And get like a totally different kind of look to it if you're not feeling the default one. Whoops. I hit scale, but I meant to hit seed. Sorry, I was thinking seed. Right? And you know, that may just keep clicking and you'll get different results, and you know, whichever one you like best will be the one that you can go with. But otherwise, this scene is ready to render out of Cinema 4D into After Effects. And then for render settings, what you're going to want to do is under your save option, make sure that your compositing project file here is checked on as save, include 3D data, and you can just save the project file here automatically. You don't even have to check that on. But we want to do like an image sequence, like a TIFF or a Targa sequence, and I did mine at 1280 by 720, and then your frame range here will be like 36 with our camera wobble. So you just render those frames. You don't need to render anything before or after that. We're going to fix that in After Effects so that we don't have to do it and waste our time. And the easiest way to separately render these is to group things together that you want on and off. So all our grass and our clay, well, I want the clay to be in with the wall. So I'm going to move that in with the wall. So our grass is separate, so group those three objects together and call it grass. And now you can, your rows are together and your walls together. Okay? And the wall includes our foul poles and our clay as well. You can do, you know, all separate renders if you want and just stack them accordingly in After Effects. But what you're going to want to do is use the traffic lights to manage which one you're rendering and what's not. So the bottom one is visible in the renderer, so you can leave these all on but turn off wall and grass as red on the bottom one, and it won't render it. So if I just hit render, it's just going to render the rows of seats now instead of rendering everything together. So you can work with everything turned on, but then just when it comes to rendering, have them turned off, whichever way you'd like to go. And then you just do 3 separate renders, okay, and you save them as grass only, seats only, wall only, and make sure your alpha channel is checked on so that we can uncheck separate alpha, just regular alpha channel, and we will use that to just composite things in After Effects and able to have more control over our color corrections. Alright, so we're done with the Cinema 4D aspect of our tutorial, and now we're going to work in After Effects to composite this together, this baseball wall scene together. So go to where you rendered your Cinema 4D files, and what it should have spit out if you checked on the compositing project file option, it'll render out a .aec file, which is, you know, it's a composition, and if you hit open, it automatically imports your image sequence with it in a composition with your lights and your camera. There's tons of Cinema 4D to After Effects tutorials out there if you want to go more in depth for it. I'm just going to show you that this camera is keyframed with our camera move in it, and our clip follows along with it. It's perfect. Now you want to go in and import the other 2 that we rendered as separate compositions, and you know, you don't have to do it this way. You can use an object buffer and kind of set the alpha channel with it. I just like doing it this way because if you want to bring in a separate, you know, you don't want to just do something different with the grass or the wall. You don't have to render the whole thing out, and you know, I just like it like that for some reason. You can do it whichever way you feel comfortable with. So I've got the grass in here, and I'm going to put our seats in there with it, and I'm going to stack these correctly. We want the wall on top, no, we want the grass on top of the wall, and then the seats behind it. And we zoom out, and you see we've got our composition here, and they all follow along with each other. It's perfect. Do a quick RAM preview. There it goes. Alright, now we obviously need the camera to hold its position before and after our camera move. And what you want to do for that is highlight all three of your image sequences, right click, time, enable time remapping. This is how you do camera speed ups and slowdowns for any kind of clip speed, matrix effects and whatnot. And what we're going to want to do is move to about 2 seconds in, 60 frames, and I want to hit the left bracket key to move my three compositions or image sequences to the front or to where the playhead is. And then I want to extend these all the way to the beginning so that they're holding on the frame 0 until we enter a new keyframe value. They're going to hold on whatever the next keyframe value is. So basically they're holding still for as long as we specify on this this first keyframe. And we're going to have to make my composition a little bit longer. I'm going to make it 150 frames, and then I'm just going to extend the end frames all the way to the end. Okay, and it's holding on that last keyframe. See, it's holding on number 37, even though we're on frame 149 now. So if we render that, do a RAM preview of that, holds, moves, camera wobble, holds, perfect. Looks good. It looks good. Now, we saved a bunch of time in Cinema 4D by not adding their motion blur to it, because we can easily add it here in After Effects. So go to a new adjustment layer, drop it right above your image sequences, and highlight Fast Blur in your effects and presets, and drop it into the adjustment layer. Go to your keyframes of your camera moves, and hit Blurriness keyframe for the value, and then go about halfway between your keyframes, and let's enter a value of about 15, and then go to the last value, the last keyframe value in your time remap, and hit 0, so that if you look at the keyframes, it picks up halfway through and then it drops off. And let's just go ahead and make these easy ease keyframes. Right click, easy ease, or hit F9. All right, just so they kind of ease in a little bit better. You want to do repeat edge pixels so that it gets rid of this little border going on here, and then you want to change it to just horizontal because it's just a horizontal camera move, so you don't need the vertical distortion. So now if we do the RAM preview, you can see it's not blurry, blurry, and then not blurry, exactly how we programmed it. So that's a lot faster than waiting for Cinema 4D to do their scene motion blur. And now we're going to add our titles. I've provided the titles that I used. The font in it is called the Lobster font. It's a really good font, kind of baseball looking. And you want to drop your PSD in there. Drop it right under the adjustment layer so that it gets the motion blur too once it moves out. And you see what it did. It dropped it right in the center of the composition because it's a 2D layer. Now if we click on for a 3D layer, we've got it. Okay. Now we want to, it's disappeared with our camera. We want to extend our camera the whole way. Should have done that before. Do the lights, the camera, everything, all the way over. Okay. Now it disappeared, but it didn't really disappear. It's just way down here. Okay. So you want to move it relative to that camera. So zoom out, find it in your composition, and pull it up in front of your camera. All right. Now it's too big. Now you don't want to move it back in the Z direction because then it's just going to disappear, okay? Or it's not going to sync up with the camera move, sorry. Like, because you see, it's doing my camera move here, and it's not working, okay? It's not working. So, don't hit it in the Z position, even though you want to scale it, okay? Move it into the general area and scale it down. Scale it, just about right, and then only move it in the X and Y dimensions. So get that the footage for the down the line, the distance to the wall, and then move it into place here. Alright, slide it over, make sure it takes up most of the room, and then you'll see that it's kind of dipping out here, which is not correct because our camera is not synced up with our camera move here. So hit U to reveal your keyframes, okay? and move the playhead to it, and drag these keyframes, select them all, and drag them over, and hold shift to like lock in the first keyframe of your camera move. Alright? And then extend it in both directions, and now watch, we move and the titles stick to the wall. Perfect. See how they stick there? And there's no keyframing of that at all. It's in the 3D space that is filmed by the camera. So as opposed to our clips that are rendered as images, if we deleted the camera, our wall would still move, but our titles would not. So I'll prove it to you. Watch. See, our camera, our titles are here. The wall is still moving, but the title's not. The title is way up here. So there you have it. Okay, so we've got that one in place. Now let's do the same thing with number 2, title number 2, the Red Jays versus the Blue Sox. And let's get in position here. Let's find where our title is hiding, and let's move it up into place so we can see it. And what did we scale this one down to? We scale this one down 30%, so it's 29 here. And let's slide it over into place, and watch, it's going to move along with it. See? And it's picking up our motion blur from our adjustment layer. So we're looking good. We're in business here. The one detail you got to add is that your overlapping titles go onto, or your titles overlap onto different wall panels. So what you have to do is, real simply, just get a rectangular mask tool, zoom in on your, zoom in on the title so you can see the whole thing, as big as you can, and just find this little groove here and highlight the groove. Okay, and now we've got that groove highlighted, and we just go to add. You can either hit invert or change it to subtract, and now if we deselect it, there's our gap in our wall. That's what we want. It's a little more realistic looking like that. And then do that one on this title. Same deal. Find the title, mask it. Real simple move here. Invert. And there it is. Okay, so we're almost done here. The only thing to do is I add a little color correction to each of our layers, and this is why I said render it separately, because I think the wall is pretty good how it is. The wall should pop out the most in this scene. The seats and the grass should be kind of secondary. The grass came out a little dark, so I'm going to do levels. You can do curves, whatever your preferred method is, and I'm going to bring just a little bit of the midtones up in the grass, so we go from that to that. All right, and I'm going to go to the seats and do my levels, and I'm going to bring those down a little bit so they're a little darker, so they contrast a little bit more with the wall. And you may want to also do a saturation on those. Hue, saturation, and just bring down the saturation a little bit on those seats, just so it's a little more low key. And maybe on the grass too. Let's try that. Whatever you think is the right look. Yeah, I think that's good. Bring the saturation down on those two, maybe a little bit higher on the grass than what I left it on. But now you see how much more the wall pops out, and I'm still going to color correct this one just a little bit, just because I should. I'm going to bring the midtones down a little bit. Highlights are not in the right spot. Basically in cinema you just want to get it close. You don't want to try so hard to get it exactly right in Cinema 4D when it takes 5 seconds in After Effects. I'm going to bring the saturation down just a little bit on that one too. So you check your effects. You can turn them on and off to see the clay looks a little dark. I may want to go back and change that in Cinema, or render that separately. You can do that as well. But I think the clay is a little dark, probably too dark for fixing in After Effects and getting the wall right. But the only other thing I added before, or in my example, when I submitted this, is a little bit of a vignette with some grunge on the outside. So I'm going to do that really quick. Just do a black solid, black solid, and then I downloaded a grunge map from cgtextures.com. I will provide the link to it so that there's tons of different examples of a grunge texture, and you can take your pick on those. And I just drop the opacity down a little bit, and then on the grunge maps I mess with the levels a little bit so that it would be a little grungier in the corners, and then I pre-compose them to vignette. And then do an ellipse tool and just double click on it so that it selects a full screen oval, and then hit invert. Go to your mask options and bump up the feather so that it feathers out, and then it's still that's too dark of a vignette, so drop the opacity overall down just 80% or so, and then you got a cool vignette going on too, and it draws way more attention to your titles that way. So you can set up this camera to fit just about any size title that will go across the screen, and then as long as there's a nice pan in between, a good bit of distance into the next one, you got the same idea. You can put something screen left here. I guess the one other cool trick I could show you that I thought of while I was doing this is, if baseball, a lot of the walls are green, but sometimes sports stadium walls are blue, so you could do an effect for your wall here, and you do effect, and you go to color corrections, change color, and you go color to change. You select the green, and you do a hue transform, and you can get a blue wall without messing with anything in Cinema 4D. I think it's pretty cool. And then you can do the same thing on the seats as well. Change color, select the darkness of the seats, hue transform, and you might have to mess with that one a little bit because of the filters. Oops, wrong one. There you go, a little blue. Matching tolerance up a little bit. There's some blue seats. Bump up the saturation. And now we've got a blue scene. So without much work at all, we've totally changed how this one looks. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and you've seen it on TV, and it's not too hard to create in Cinema 4D. And the beauty of this is you can just replace the title as a Photoshop file, and it updates automatically, and you don't have to even touch it ever again. You've built it. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you later.